The summer promised to be hot and dry. While the tourists on the coast enjoyed this prospect and found it rather exciting, the locals were not happy with the idea of another scorching season. In the luxurious mansion by the sea, everything was quiet and calm. Suddenly, the silence was broken like a hot knife through butter by a child's cry. Raphael was throwing a tantrum. I, the mother of a 2-month-old baby, woke up instantly when I heard my son's cry. I struggled to get up from my chair and went to the baby's room. My little boy, what's happening?" I said. Hearing my familiar voice, the baby was silent for a few seconds and then screamed even louder. I approached the crib, leaned over, and struggled to lift the baby from the soft, waterproof mattress. Raphael wasn't small at all when he was born. He weighed 11 lb and was 2 feet tall. He was a real giant, and I, slender and graceful, managed to bring him into the world without the need for a cesarean section. Despite the insistence of the doctors, Fernando, my husband, and even my mother-in-law, who couldn't stand her daughter-in-law, I decided that Raphael should come into the world naturally, sincerely believing that this would establish a telepathic and extrasensory connection between the two of us. My mother-in-law's aversion to me had a perfectly understandable explanation. Sonora Catalina Ramos believed that her son, Fernando, heir to the illustrious Ramos lineage, deserved someone better than me, who came from a family of average antique dealers. In Catalina's proud and ambitious dreams, there was a desire to be related to a family with ancient royal roots, going back to Frederick Barbarossa or Charlemagne. But Fernando didn't care about my lineage. Normally, girls from rich and famous families are capricious, know their worth, have a strong character, and can leave if they don't like something, because they have somewhere to go. I, on the other hand, had nowhere to go. My mother died in childbirth, and my father died before I was married, leaving me only an antique store as an inheritance. That's where Fernando and I met. But as soon as we got married, I sold the store, as I was destined to live comfortably in the splendid mansion by the sea, without realizing the price I would pay for this fairy tale life. The Ramos family had so many connections that any wrongdoing could be ignored. I dreamed of running away from the mansion, leaving the city, or simply disappearing. Living with Fernando was becoming increasingly difficult. 4 years ago, he seemed perfect for me, my Prince Charming. And I was a real Cinderella, which is why I agreed to marry him after just 3 months of dating. I was hopelessly in love with Fernando, self-centered and selfish, completely devoid of love. He married me because he needed an heir, a son to carry on his legacy. Fernando couldn't find a partner within his circle. The women around him had grown up in wealth and luxury, just like him, so charming them with material wealth was impossible. When their true nature revealed itself, the girls easily broke off these relationships and left. I, however, couldn't leave. Fernando blocked my escape route right after the wedding, insisting on selling the antique store. We got married and my life became a living hell. I was very thin, and the doctors said I couldn't have children. Instead of supporting me, Fernando shouted that he had made a mistake, that he had chosen the wrong woman and couldn't get a divorce because it would be shameful. For 3.5 years, we tried to conceive a child, but it was all in vain. Every time the doctor said the pregnancy hadn't occurred, Fernando would get angry and shamelessly throw things in front of the doctors. He shouted that I wasn't a real woman, but a pitiful imitation for not being able to give birth. I was in despair. My soul was burning. Late that night, when everyone had fallen asleep, I went to the coast. I found a quiet spot, surrounded by rocks on one side and huge boulders on the other. I had to climb up slippery rocks covered in silt to reach a place where there was no one. I stared at the dark water and realized that I couldn't live like this, that nothing could hold me back in this world. I took off my light silk dress and walked towards the ocean. In all the time I've lived here, I've never learned to swim. I took one step at a time, without fear, going further and further out until my head was completely submerged. I realized that all my suffering would end now. When I almost lost consciousness, I had a vision. I saw a boy playing the violin. He got distracted, stopped playing, and turned to me. "Mommy, come home." "I need you, Mommy." At that moment, I abruptly emerged and began to breathe heavily. I kicked, surfacing and sinking again. I realized that I probably wouldn't make it to shore since I couldn't swim. I sank again when suddenly someone grabbed me by the hair. A dark figure pulled me towards the shore. When I coughed, I looked at my rescuer. Irina, what are you doing here? Sorry, miss, I followed you. Irina worked as a maid in the Ramos family mansion. This Russian girl had always seemed strange to me, but she did her job perfectly, and now she had saved my life. Why did you follow me? To save you, replied the maid calmly. But how did you know? Something made me wake up in the middle of the night. I decided to go out for some fresh air, and I saw you going somewhere beyond the mansion. I know that Mr. Ramos has forbidden you to go anywhere without his escort. He keeps you in the mansion like... Irina stopped. Like a prisoner? I completed the sentence, realizing that I might have offended or insulted Mr. Fernando Ramos's wife with my frankness. Irina continued quickly. Anyway, I felt something was wrong and I followed you, as if an unknown force was pushing me. I hugged Irina. Thank you, you were in the right place at the right time. Let's keep this a secret, okay? As you wish, ma'am, replied Irina, and we both went back to the mansion. No one ever knew about this incident. Irina knew how to keep secrets and keep quiet. Besides, the maid knew what Fernando would do to me if he found out. And a month later, I finally became pregnant. The pregnancy was difficult, but I followed all the doctor's recommendations. I finally found a purpose in life, and I carried that purpose under my heart. With the birth of the baby, my life changed. I experienced true maternal happiness. Although Fernando didn't change his attitude, he still screamed and made me cry. He said that I was feeding, washing, and wrapping Rafael in the wrong way. When the baby cried, Fernando would simply slam the door and leave so as not to hear anything. Catalina, Fernando's mother, added fuel to the fire, always picking on me for anything. Over time, I learned to ignore her words. I pretended to listen, but thought about my own affairs. It was Irina who gave me this advice. The maid, for her part, was always there and helped with the baby. After the incident on the coast, we started talking and our communication turned into friendship, although we had to hide it from Fernando and his mother. Otherwise, Irina would be quickly fired. The maid not only helped with the baby, but also gave practical advice. It was with her cunning plan that we managed to send Catalina on vacation in other countries for several months. It seemed like a gift, but in fact it was a gift for me, to live without the intrusive mother-in-law for a few months. Rafael grew up to be an intelligent and well-behaved boy, thanks to my upbringing. His father, on the other hand, worked constantly and waited for the day when his son would grow up and take his place. There was no emotional connection between father and son. The years passed. When it was time for Rafael to go to school, we decided to move to the capital so that he could attend the most expensive and elite private school. We didn't sell the mansion on the coast. Catalina would continue to live there. However, we had to lay off half the staff. Of course, Irina was the first to be fired. Catalina noticed how the maid always interacted kindly with me. We promised to meet again, but this promise would never be kept, as there were no cell phones or internet at the time. I gave Irina an envelope with money in it. She refused for a long time, but I insisted. You saved my life, not just that time on the coast, but every day, just by being there. I kept that money secretly from my husband for several years. Take it and never forget me. We said goodbye with tears in our eyes, knowing that we would never see each other again. Many years passed. Rafael grew up, finished school, college, and graduated from Harvard, becoming a lawyer and then obtaining a doctorate in jurisprudence. Fernando, my husband, owned a diversified business involved in construction, supplies, and logistics. He tried to involve Rafael in the business during his studies, but my son consistently rejected his attempts. Later, Fernando wanted to appoint Rafael as vice president of his holding company, but he said he would achieve everything on his own and offered to work in the legal department as a simple employee. 10 more years passed and Rafael turned 40, modestly celebrating his birthday, despite being vice president of one of the largest holding companies in the country. His father, myself, his wife and daughter, along with old Catalina, were the main guests at the party. It was in the luxurious restaurant of the capital's Grand Hotel that Fernando gave his son his main present. Rafael would become president of the company and chairman of the holding company's board of directors. The Ramosis, father and son, didn't fear that their business would be absorbed, as Fernando owned 100% of the organization's shares and would remain the owner even after he retired. Rafael gained experience and became a true business shark, ruthless with his opponents but fair with his employees. He thanked his father for the gift, hugged and kissed his mother, bowed to his grandmother, sat down next to his wife and daughter, and the festive evening slowly drew to its inevitable conclusion. Time passed, and life took its course. On that warm, sunny day, everyone felt down, even though they had been prepared for such an outcome for a long time. Catalina Ross was on her deathbed. She had finished her journey at the age of 98 and simply wouldn't wake up. Rafael took care of all the funeral arrangements. Fernando, who loved his mother unconditionally, would sit by her coffin for hours, talking to her, as if he wanted to tell her everything he hadn't had the chance to during Catalina's life. He also confessed his filial love for his mother, who, although she didn't love her son's wife and never approved of his choice, had passed away. Catalina, the grandmother who had long made my life miserable, had left this world, and Rafael, who wasn't particularly fond of his grandmother, breathed a sigh of relief. But the newly appointed president of the Ramos and Co-Holding Company didn't know that Catalina would still make her presence felt. One typical sunny morning, Rafael got up and left his country house. He decided not to go to work, but to meet his longtime business partner in a restaurant to discuss the intricacies of a rather dubious business deal. He was very disturbed by the apparent lack of transparency in the scheme to attract capital to implement the project. Pedro, agile and shrewd, was always late for meetings and sat down at Rafael's table without apologizing. We talked for about 2 hours until the phone of one of the businessmen reminded him of something. "It's time for me to go. I have another meeting," said Rafael. "Don't forget to send me the calculations by email. I'll review the coefficients and then we'll talk about implementation." I nodded to the waiter asking for the bill. "Are you paying by card or in cash?" "By card," I replied. I put the card in the reader, but the payment didn't go through. I tried another card, then a third, to no avail. Pedro politely put his card in the terminal and paid the bill. "Strange, it must be something with my bank cards. Thanks, Pedro. I need to go to the bank." I got in the car and drove to the bank. As I entered the building, I was completely calm, confident that they would quickly correct this mistake. I imagined my surprise when the bank manager replied abruptly, "Your account has been closed by your father." I was shocked. My father could close my account? Did he have that authority? I quickly dialed my father's number. After a few rings, Fernando Ramos's voice echoed, and his words shocked me. "You're not my son. Your mother had you with another man. Gather your courage, come to the office, sort out your affairs, and leave." It was an unexpected blow. Everything became clear when Catalina's inheritance was opened up. As well as dividing up the estate between the heirs, Fernando received a letter written by his mother. "Son, I've kept silent for a long time, but I can't take this information to my grave. Rafael is not your son. This viper had an affair with your former business partner when you were at a conference on information technologies in the construction industry in another city, and she stayed in the room. That's where it all happened. The doorman told me everything. Make your decision." It was a scandal. Fernando was so furious that he could do something terrible. I was lucky not to be home at the time. There's no telling what he would do to me, although it's possible to guess, knowing that he would even hit me for oversalting the soup. Rafael understood perfectly well that, in this situation, he needed to save not himself, but his mother. The most Fernando could do was deprive him of all his money, but it was important to Rafael that Fernando didn't deprive his mother. Without hesitation, Rafael went home, where he kept a safe with money. On the way, he called me to find out where I was. Unaware, I was walking quietly through the park, watching the birds. I missed several calls from my husband, but I never answered, because I knew I'd only hear shouting and accusations. Rafael parked near the park and met me. "Mom, we're going home." "No, not home. I'm taking you to the store. It's a surprise." I loved my son's surprises, so I happily got into the expensive car. But a few hours later, I began to feel that something was wrong. "Son, where are we going?" "To the store," I said. "Don't deceive your mother. Tell me the truth." Then Rafael confessed everything. saying that he would take me away from Fernando to protect me. I looked darkly out of the window. I could have said that Fernando was the only man in my life, but I remained silent. Perhaps it was because I had dreamed of running away all my life, but I had never been able to leave my son, even now that he was grown up. Rafael sped down the highway. We drove for a long time. Fernando kept calling, but none of us dared answer. The only person Rafael called was his wife, explaining everything and asking her not to worry. We kept driving until dark, deciding to spend the night in a roadside motel and leave again in the morning. During this time, we talked about everything except Fernando and the incident. We just enjoyed each other's company, without understanding what would happen next. Rafael remembered how I was always there, supporting and helping. He remembered how we used to play the violin together, and I looked lovingly at my son, understanding what I had lived this life for. The next day, we drove through a completely unknown small town. We decided to stop for food and water. "Stop at that store," I ordered. "Whatever you say, Mom." I got out of the car, leaving my bag behind. Rafael took the bag and put almost all the money in it. Fortunately, the bag was almost empty and everything fit. He also got out of the car and followed me into the store. "Mom, take the bag." "Why did you bring it?" "It could have stayed in the car," I said, picking up the bag and understanding everything by its weight. I looked into my son's eyes, which were full of tears. "I love you," Rafael said and ran back to the car. He started the car and accelerated. He needed to get back to the capital and talk to his father. I walked through the antique store and noticed the violin I used to love to play. I found the best violin teacher for Rafael. He fell in love with this instrument when we still lived in the mansion by the sea. He loved going out on the balcony and playing pieces from the great classics, but Fernando never liked that. He didn't like anything, but our son fully shared my passion. I put the bag full of money on the floor and picked up the violin. I closed my eyes and passed the bow over the strings. Mentally, I flashed back to the day I almost drowned. I remembered the vision and the melody played by the boy, my son. The first notes emerged slowly, as if sounds from the past were emerging from my soul, penetrating every vibration of the strings. The store became quiet, as if time itself had stopped to listen to the story told by the music. I remembered my youth, love, and the difficulties I faced. The violin became not only an instrument, but also a magic key to my soul, unlocking all the nuances of my past. The melody filled the store, and listeners, including passers-by, stopped to absorb this flow of time. Tears like precious drops ran down the faces of those who heard the concert. My melody touched not only my soul, but also the hearts of those in the store. The last notes faded, and I looked up from the violin, meeting the admiring and touched eyes of the audience. At that moment, I felt that my life, like music, carried a power capable of uniting people, reminding them of the value of every moment on this infinite journey. An elderly woman approached the shopkeeper. "I want to buy this violin." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this violin is not for sale." "I'm willing to pay any amount you ask." "This violin is priceless," replied the young woman. My grandmother once owned this store. When she was young, she worked as a maid for a rich but unhappy woman. When that woman left, she gave my grandmother a large sum of money, saying that they were great friends. My grandmother didn't waste the money. She came to this town and bought this store on purpose, because this antique store belonged to that woman. When she finally found and bought the store, she went to the mansion where she worked, hoping to find her friend, but she found a horribly evil woman who happened to be her friend's mother-in-law. She said that her son, his wife, and their son had died in a car accident when they moved to the capital. It was a shock for my grandmother. She was about to leave in tears when the mean woman stopped her and said, "Take your friend's violin. I don't need it." "I recognized my violin immediately," I interrupted. "Only there was no accident. Here's Catalina. Here's the damned viper," I cursed. "Exactly. The evil woman was called Catalina." "Wait a minute," said the young woman, opening an old trunk and taking out an envelope. Inside the envelope was a photograph and a letter. "Isn't this yours?" I took the black and white photograph, yellowed by time. In the photo, I saw my younger self and Rafael, then 3 years old. I put the photo away and opened the letter, recognizing my handwriting. I read, "Irina, I'll never forget you. You will always be in my memory and in my heart. And you, never forget me. Take my photo as proof of my gratitude for everything, for being there when I needed you most. Thank you for helping with Raphael. I'm sorry for refusing to run away with you to another city. I can't leave Raphael, and if I take him with me, Fernando will easily find us and destroy us. You understand that? Yes, maybe I don't live the best life, but I'm already happy because God introduced me to you and gave me a son. With you, I felt truly alive, and that's the most beautiful feeling. Promise me you'll come to the mansion one of the summer months. I think that when Raphael is on vacation, we'll come here as a family. I hope it won't be goodbye forever, because the love I feel for you is like an invisible thread that connects us, even miles apart. I cried and turned to the young woman. So Irina is your grandmother? Yes. Where is she now? I asked hopefully. She's no longer alive, came the reply, as I cried, hugging my best friend's granddaughter. Raphael sped down the highway, hoping to get to his father's house faster. However, he didn't arrive until late at night. With a key in his hand, he quietly walked through the front door and into the living room, where he saw his drunken father holding some papers. Cautiously, he took the papers and saw that it was a paternity test. My father looked at Raphael and then at the results, where it was clearly written that biological material number 1 and number 2 were 99.99% compatible. Fernando was his biological father. I immediately called my mother, despite the late hour. A sleepy voice answered, "Son, what's wrong?" "Mom, are you okay? Are you in the hotel?" "No, I'm in a better place than the hotel." "Where are you? I'm going to pick you up." "Why didn't you tell me that Grandma Catalina lied? You never cheated on Dad. He's my biological father." If I had told you everything from the beginning, you would never have taken me to my favorite antique store, which I sold believing in the Cinderella story. God brought me to the beginning of everything. I recognized this town from the start and once had my own store here. I'm not leaving here for anything. I've walked my journey, raised an intelligent, kind, and loving son, and now I want to be here. Good night, my dear son. I never returned to the capital. At first, I lived with Irina's granddaughter. Then Raphael secretly bought a house for me in that city. Raphael's accounts were unblocked on the same day that Fernando confirmed his paternity. He asked his son for forgiveness, but Raphael never told him where he took me. He didn't forget to visit me and always sent money. Finally, the woman who had been through a difficult life journey found a happy place at the beginning, where it all started.